Hello everyone and welcome to the Anime Void. I'm Brian, your host, and today I have a bone to pick with the third Fuyuki Holy Grail War. I actually made a video on this topic very early on my channel, but that was more for comedic purposes. Now, I want to do a more comprehensive and simplified explanation about the multi-timeline nonsense that is this Grail War. Well, as simplified as I can make it given how batshit some of these things are. You think the fifth war, with its 3 routes, was a trip? Child's play. First, we begin with the basis, that being the Stay Night timeline. Like all of the timelines, this war takes place in the 1930s, just before the start of World War II. It's from this version of events that we can build up an understanding for the others. After the first 2 Heavensfield rituals ended in failure, the second being when it was first dubbed the Holy Grail War, rules were set in place to, hopefully, have more orderly conduct. Orderly conduct was not had. First, let's go over what we know about the participants in this war. The Master of Saber was actually 2 people. Sisters from the Edefeld family, using their family's special magecraft, were both masters of the same servant, counting as only one master. The servant was split into 2 different aspects of themselves, likely one of them being an altar of some kind. Or perhaps it was something more akin to Charlemagne and Karl der Grosse from Fate Extella Link. But both are Saber in this case. I believe that this situation is more likely than an altar, since at this time only true heroic spirits could be summoned, so anti-heroes or villains would not be possible. The Master of Archer was likely an unnamed Imperial Japanese Army officer, as seen in Type Redline. In that story, he would summon Oda Nobunaga during the Third Holy Grail War and would be killed by her. Now, due to timeline shenanigans, this technically isn't connected to the same Holy Grail War that would lead into Stay Night and Apocrypha, because Nasu likes to make things needlessly complicated. We can have a guess that the officer might have been the Master of Archer regardless, given the facts that the Japanese Imperial Army was definitely involved in the Third Fuyuki Holy Grail War, and there was an unmentioned master during the explanation given in Hollow Ataraxia, so he is as good of a guess as any. However, Nobunaga can't be the archer in the main Grail War, as, under the normal rules placed on the Fuyuki summoning ritual, only Western heroic spirits can be summoned due to the Holy Grail being Western in concept, and the summoning system was made by Western mages. Shiro Amakusa being an exception because he's Christian, and the Grail is also a Christian concept, I guess? Honestly, I'm personally just going to believe that Nobu is the archer in all versions, and ignore the no Eastern servants allowed thing, because the reasoning is so stupid. Lancer is the one servant that we know the most about in this war, as he was Fionn McCool. And for personal reasons, I'm picturing him to be the version we saw in Diermud's flashbacks in Fate Zero, rather than Twink McBitch that we get in Fate Grand Order. I do not care if that is not in line with mythology or canon. I want Irish Daddy. His master was Darnik Prestoniga de Millennia, who will be covered in the next timeline. There is pretty much 0 information on Ryder and Castor or their potential masters. Although, if we were to ignore what was said in Fate Grand Order, that being that the first and only Fuyuki Holy Grail War took place in 2004 in that timeline, we could say that Castor was Solomon. Honestly, I'm unsure why this isn't the case to begin with. It would have been simple enough to make Maresbury Anosphere Olga's grandfather instead of father, and it slots in perfectly as being another timeline for the third war. And for the timeline with Romani, you could yada yada that with Solomon being incarnated in 2004 as a last minute addition to his wish because of the final vision he had. But still, my wants and desires don't really matter. I just wanted to gripe about that a bit. I'm really just here to give facts and posit hopefully credible theories. Next is Assassin, who is of course one of the 19 Hasa-i-Saba. His unnamed master was a puppet user. This assassin was a diminutive man reaching only up to a grown adult's knees. Here is an image to help you visualize those kind of proportions.
It's just a baby!
Though his moniker is unknown, we do know his Zabania, and let me tell you, cyber fantasy is, admittedly, kind of absolutely insane. This Hassan touches his victim's head and transforms their brain into gunpowder, blowing up the upper half of their body.
I just a baby!
Because sure, why not? Honestly, I can understand turning yourself into a human-sized blue ring octopus. I can understand replacing your arm with a demon arm. I can understand weaponizing dissociative identity disorder to insanely effective levels. I can even understand becoming death incarnate by pure force of will. But how do you go about turning a human brain into gunpowder? If I think too much about this, my brain is going to explode. Though if your brain is exploding, why not try hitting the like button, see if that helps. If not, try subscribing too. And if that doesn't help either, well, that's between you and God. Back on topic. We finally have Berserker, who does not feature in this war. The Einsburns decided to use what some people would call alternative strategies in order to claim victory, so they wanted to summon an extra class to replace Berserker, though the nerds out there would call this cheating. They had it down to two choices, an Avenger or a Ruler, and in the Stay Night timeline, they chose the Avenger, Angramanyu, which, by God, I know I am probably butchering. Now, this is where things go off the rails for this timeline. The Einsburns believed that Avenger would be a living calamity, able to slaughter anything that stood in its way. But as it turns out, this Avenger was born with glass bones and paper skin, and was the weakest servant of all. So weak, in fact, that he was killed on the 4th day of the war. But this is where he truly comes into play, just not how the Einsburns wanted. Avenger was absorbed into the Grail like all defeated servants are, but his presence corrupted it. In essence, the Grail became Angry Mango, and thus became all the world's evils. No one knew it, but a wish could no longer be truly granted through Heavensfeel now. The only thing that it could give was despair, as would be found out by Kiritsugu Emiya in the 4th Holy Grail War, and then by his children once again in the 5th. It went unnoticed in the 3rd because the Lesser Grail was destroyed during the battle, thus rendering the ritual a failure. The next timeline we will be covering is the Apocrypha version of the 3rd Holy Grail War, and the one true branching timeline rather than a completely alternate one. This is also where we're going to be talking a little more about Darnik. You see, the Imperial Japanese Army and the Nazis wanted the Grail for their own, and Darnik decided to join the Nazis. And while he always intended to betray them, he was still a Nazi and therefore a total dick. As stated previously, he was the master who summoned the Lancer, Fionn McCool. The major point of difference in this timeline is the fact that the Einsburns summoned the ruler-class servant, Shiro Amakusa. Though the exact timeline and events are unknown, it is likely that Amakusa lasted longer than Avenger did. What we do know is that Ruler and Lancer fought to the death, with Ruler's apparent victory given the events of Apocrypha. However, there was still no definitive victor of the Grail War, as Darnik, with the aid of the Nazis, stole the Greater Grail, with none of the other masters having the means to stop him after all of the fighting. So here we are, 2 for 2 with the Einsburns messing up. Now for the next timeline, we are looking at the Imperial Capital Holy Grail Strange Story. The main war that takes place in the story of Fate Type Redline and Fate Koha Ace is not the 3rd Fuyuki Holy Grail War. The war preceding it was, albeit an alternate timeline of it. The archer, Oda Nobunaga, after killing her master and taking on a new one in Kaname Asama, goes on to claim victory in this version of the Grail War. And almost immediately, another one is ushered in with the combatants mostly featuring the Japanese Imperial Army and the Nazis. There is really no other information on the events of this Third War, however, so we don't know if all of the servants were different, and we especially don't know if the Einsburns messed up for a third time. Though, given my previous statement, you know my thoughts on this, that it's best to ignore that this is a completely different timeline and just slot Oda in as the Archer. The best rule is keep it simple, stupid. Then, for the Third Holy Grail War that took place in the Prisma Illya timeline, we know nothing. We do know that it happened, as the Fourth War was meant to happen, until Kiritsugu and Irisfield decided to bail and protect their daughter. This ended up destroying the ritual, so the assumption can be made that all of the previously stated players were there, but we can't be certain about that, or how it exactly played out, or even what servant the Einsburn summoned. For the final part, we will be talking about a complete offshoot of the Third Holy Grail War, more so than the others. The True and False Holy Grail Wars. Here, the events of this version of the Grail War are about the same as the ones in the main Stay Night timeline. In fact, it is likely the exact same, and this can be seen as a sequel. After the Third Holy Grail War, an American mage organization managed to take the data of the ritual, and sometime after the Fifth War's conclusion, they held their own ritual in America. While it is a copy of the original ritual, it was modified because here it's more for research purposes, so the whole thing is rather flexible, and essentially 2 Grail Wars are happening simultaneously. But with that covers all of the currently available information on the Third Fuyuki Holy Grail War. I honestly do find it very odd that we have really nothing to go on, either for writer or caster, not counting my long-shot theories. But I am pretty confident in my guess for Saber, unless it ends up being a servant that hasn't even been revealed or mentioned anywhere yet. Also, legitimately, some things need to be retconned here. And just like small stuff. Like again, the thing about the Grail not being allowed to summon Eastern servants because it's a Western concept, that's so stupid and just unnecessary. Just make Nobunaga the Archer always, and then Redline is a branching path to the main Grail War. That's all you need to do, and it simplifies this mess so much. I really did try my best to condense this as much as I could into a understandable format, but what are your thoughts on how I did that and the Third Grail War in the general? Did this video help you understand it at all? Let me know down in the comments below. I am very interested to find out. And I hope to catch you next time in the void. Later.